I'm Hillary Hendershot, your host, and this is the Retirement Years on Profit Boss Radio, episode 165. The Retirement Years on Profit Boss Radio is your weekly wealth building and retirement mastermind. Profit Boss is also a movement for women who want to reach their full wealth potential and be financially free. Let me be your guide as you defy the odds, take control of your money, grow your wealth, and retire well. Do you want the secrets of wealth and retirement to be yours? This is the place. I'm Hillary Hendershot. I'm a certified financial planner running a leading advisory firm for women and couples, and I'm sharing with you real stories from real life and real people who are making it happen. Forget Wall Street. You ready? Let's do this. Hi, friends. I am coming to you with episode 165 of Profit Boss Radio today. And today is the first episode I've published since May 25th, the day of George Floyd's death. So I come to you hat in hand. I think it's important that you hear my thoughts on the subject. And I don't know if this is the 1025th leadership positioning statement you've heard and you're tired of hearing it and you just roll your eyes. However, it just wouldn't be complete for me if I didn't say something. I have been decidedly apolitical with you and will remain decidedly apolitical with you because I am fundamentally interested in empowering you one-on-one. And my position is that my thoughts about how the country or people should be governed are irrelevant to that. I believe policies should be lax and people should be free and empowered, and that's as far as it goes. However, George Floyd's death and the deaths of the other people of color and Black people who have died violently, unarmed, at the hands of bad police officers isn't a political topic. It's a human topic. So persistent injustice and inequality just can't be ignored. We can't ignore it anymore. So I stand with you. My team and I stand with the Black community and with other people around the world to end racism and bias, systemic injustice, and police brutality. I believe all human beings should be treated with respect, equality, dignity, and that you should all have the opportunity to create your life, be fulfilled, and to make a difference. I personally am heartbroken about the deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, and the countless other killings of Black people. Vulnerably, I'll say I'm embarrassed that until now, I have allowed my fear of being caught in the fray, of being called a racist, of being told that I was doing it wrong or that I was unwanted, stop me from speaking up. I've also said until now that my company is by women for women. I said I work for women. But that's, of course, not inclusive. And so today I'm clarifying what has always been true about my business, that all people are welcome here, regardless of race, gender, sexual preference, or physical ability. I do believe we can change the world by changing ourselves, including our business practices. I'm very interested in leading the charge and transforming how we do business and the force field of business that we currently live in. And Black Lives Matter. You matter to me. And this episode on today's date wouldn't have been complete without that statement. You're going to hear me kick off the upcoming interview with energy and verve. And I just today, that interview was recorded several weeks ago. And today I'm not necessarily feeling that energy and verve. However, media is media. I care about you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a subscriber. Enjoy this interview with Kay Bransford on the topic of dementia. All right, Profit Boss. Today we're talking about an important but unfortunate topic that will touch many of our lives, and that's dementia. I have with me today Kay Bransford, author of the award-winning blog Dealing With Dementia, creator of the MemoryBanc system for a financial organization, which was named the #1 gift in the Brain Healthy Gift Guide by AARP, and Caregiver magazine named the tool's accompanying workbook Book of the Year. You can find her articles on the Huffington Post, and she's been a guest on the Dr. Oz Show. Welcome to Profit Boss Radio, Kay.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
How did you get involved in the topic of dementia?
Well, I had two parents that simultaneously ended up walking into different forms of dementia. I lived near them. They used to come over for dinner. I noticed some things were a little bit different with their thinking and their behavior. And it was probably over the course of about 5 to 7 years before we actually got a diagnosis, but I had just noticed some differences in the way that they behaved. And as we stepped in to do that, what we found was all the planning they had done, which they were super planners. My dad was military, so they were always ready for something to happen. I needed a lot of information to actually implement the plans that they wanted to have done. So knowing their bank accounts, where they were, where cash flow came into, all of those things got really overwhelming as I was also trying to take care of them. And so that's kind of how I got involved in this topic.
What were some of the things that you noticed were different about them?
One thing I vividly remember was my mom always had parties. So the military was always kind of hosting people over and socializing. And we used to do these onion tarts. And I made them one night when they came over for dinner and I served them. And my mom was like, "Oh my gosh, these are delicious. Can I get the recipe?"
Oh, wow.
It was just like, wait a second. I made them exactly like I had made them with her for 20 years. And she just didn't even recognize them.
I have heard that you can't get a diagnosis for Alzheimer's. Can you get a diagnosis for dementia?
Yeah, so Alzheimer's is really just one form of dementia. So dementia is really the umbrella term. So my mom ended up having vascular dementia. She had a stroke, and when they finally diagnosed her cognitive issues because of the stroke, they found out it was her second stroke. We never really noticed the first one. So that just cuts off blood to the brain. And so she had dementia from like having almost an aneurysm in your brain. Now, my dad had Alzheimer's, and he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. They do a neuropsychological test, but they also did an MRI of his brain. Could see that there was some shrinking and some clusters in his brain. And that was about 2012. So they did actually tell me he had Alzheimer's.
Okay, wow. And so as the disease progresses, what are some of the forms of care that your parents needed that you provided versus were there forms of care that you didn't or couldn't provide that they got elsewhere?
Right. Well, and I listened to your podcast last week. So it was interesting hearing about the Medicare. So my parents had actually bought into a continuing care retirement community. So they had a place to live that had assisted living and had the different services that they might need, but they didn't want them. They didn't believe that they needed help. So while I helped manage bill pay, and they actually still had a property in addition to their continuing care retirement community, and I needed to pay those bills and manage the water and upkeep. What they do needed help for beyond that was really they needed a caregiver because I couldn't be with them 24/7. So even though they were in a continuing care retirement community, they did eventually need assistance with queuing, where are you going, changing their clothes, washing things, preparing meals. So basic activities of daily life they did need help with. And I just couldn't be with them 24/7 to do that. So we needed to bring in extra help for those things.
So they did or didn't go to the continuing care community?
That's a great question. So my parents maintained their townhome. And so they actually lived in two places. They treated the continuing care retirement community initially as their vacation home.
Okay.
So they moved there full time.
And actually, the situation you're describing, I'm somewhat familiar with. I have a client who's my age, and she's managing her own mother who has pretty serious dementia to the point where she's afraid if she leaves her mom home alone, she'll like boil water and leave the stove on. And mom doesn't believe that she needs any help. And so my client in this case hasn't necessarily found a way around that. How can people deal with that? What are the ranges of outcomes if that's the situation, the patient is rejecting assistance? What happens then?
Right. And I wish that the doctors had clued me in on this very early because I didn't understand that there's a term for it. It's called anosognosia. It's a medical term for individuals that have a disease, but they can't recognize that they have this disease or medical condition. So for people that have had a stroke, but the majority of them will have this anosognosia. They won't recognize that their thinking has changed, not remembering things. It's also quite common in individuals with Alzheimer's. They just don't recognize that their thinking and behavior has changed, but they might say things like, my brain is bad, or I can't come up with this word. They'll notice some things are wrong, but they don't think it's impacting the way that they're living their life. So what I finally learned to do is one, stop reminding them or telling them that there's something wrong, because it just really builds distrust.
Right.
Because they're angry with you because they think you're telling them a story. We had 2 family interventions over the course of our navigation with our parents, and they just thought the 4 kids, we were just nuts, that we were making all these things up. So what I eventually learned to do was I would just tell them once, we'd have a conversation and say, here's what I'm seeing. What do you think about that? And then, as actually one of their doctors said to me at one point, he's like, at some point, you're just going to have to be sneaky. And I really struggled with that concept. And he didn't mean sneaky in a cruel way or a dismissive way. He just meant you might need to do things for them and they don't need to know about it. So how I dealt with it as their primary caregiver, since I was the one adult child living here, is I would tell them once, we'd have a conversation about something, and then I would implement it behind the scenes and just move forward with it and try to navigate around it without embarrassing them, belittling them, or making them feel like they didn't have any control over their life.
Mm-hmm. And some of those things were like the banking things and probably filling prescriptions, things like that.
So it didn't even come to the prescriptions because it was more the banking. So like, for instance, my mom kept losing her purse and leaving it in a cab or something. She just left it all over the place with a checkbook in it. And my dad actually went with me to the bank and I said, you know what, we're going to create a second bank account for mom. And it's going to have, $800 in it. So if she loses a checkbook, there's not a lot of money at risk.
Right.
But she'll always have that checkbook in her wallet because I know that's important to her and we can always fund it when she needs more money. So he got it. He understood it. And so we just swapped out the checkbook for her. So there's simple little things like that you can do to still help them feel whole, but also help kind of put a protection around their assets.
Okay. A mentor of mine in the business said, forgetting that where you put your keys isn't necessarily a sign of dementia, but finding them in the microwave, that might be. So what are, for some of us who are watching our parents age and, yes, people change as they get older. How do you know if the changes you're seeing are warning signs? What are some of the things to look out for?
So I think the big things is changes in their thinking and behavior, or if you saw an incident or you shared an experience and their recollection of it is very different than what you recollect. So those were the things I started noticing with my parents, was just a perception of things change.
Okay.
And the one thing that I'm pleased about is that I still have kids at home. I have one still at home, really. And it's nice to know that kids forget too. And I actually, because I have 2 parents with dementia, I did a lot of research and took a total brain health training course to learn a lot more about it. So things like misplacing your keys is more, you're not putting attention or meaning to something. So don't take those things as you're having signs of dementia, but you can't come up with words. You really can't remember something that just occurred. Those things, or if you're having people around you telling you that something's different, bring it up with your doctor. At least have a discussion with them, because there are actually a lot of medications that could create symptoms like dementia that are totally reversible.
It's funny that you bring that up because actually my stepfather-in-law, my stepmother's father, had a dementia event, but it turned out it was because he was on Zyrtec. And as soon as he came off the Zyrtec, he went back to being completely healthy and capable. And he's in his 90s. And I had no idea that Zyrtec was a thing that did that. It was a big deal for him. Did you know about the Zyrtec thing?
I did not know about the Zyrtec, but I do know that I feel like 70, and maybe when I'm 70, I'm going to say the number's 80. There's like an age when, because the brain is changing and it does shrink some, medications just operate differently in it. So something that might impact one person doesn't impact the other. I don't know that there's a consistency to some of the medications. I know I had an issue like that with my mom and a medication called tramadol. It was very devastating to my mom, where it's normally a pain medication. But in someone with dementia, it made her, she was almost like she was on an acid trip. It was devastating and put her in bed for 3 weeks after one medicine course over one day.
Oh my.
Medicines can just have a very different impact on us as we're aging in general. So that's why I say if you start to notice those things, people need to bring it up with their doctor. It's one of those things that I think we're all afraid to admit or confront or discuss, but it could be very treatable. So people really need to have that discussion with their doctor.
Great. And what's the earliest age range people need to start looking out for the signs of dementia in their loved ones?
I mean, there's people that are having early onset dementia in their 40s now. I've even seen some cases in their 30s.
Oh my.
So I would just say in general,
Be vigilant.
The biggest jump is usually after 65, and then 75 is when they start doing the age ranges for testing. So I believe after 80, it's like 50% of all people will have some form of cognitive issue. And even just a dementia, it just might be our brain slows down. So it just takes us longer to recover information. And if you find you can never recover information that you know you should know, that's when you really need to talk to your doctor.
You're talking about me. Everyone who works for me knows I can't remember anything. But I tell myself it's because I'm a mom of a toddler who has cancer and I'm running a business that's busy. But I'll talk to my doctor.
Well, too. But it also give yourself a break and know that a lot of it is attention and meaning. And I know I do this just as a habit. It's like if I don't think it's an important piece of information, I just discard it because it's easy to retrieve somewhere else. You don't need to remember everything because adults can really only remember, even healthy adults, like in your 20s, 5 to 9 pieces of information can be in your short-term memory. So give yourself a break if a lot's going on. We have our phones ringing, texts coming in. We have a computer in front of us. You might not have put attention or meaning to that piece of information. So
yeah. It's amazing to me how much I can forget, and yet I never once forgotten where I parked my car.
Good.
Yeah, it's a good sign, right?
Yes.
So I know that, for example, some of these genetics testing and diagnosis services, they can come up with an outcome that says you're likely to have Alzheimer's. A friend of mine got that. She's likely to be obese and likely to have Alzheimer's. Are there other ways to know if you're likely to have dementia, any form of dementia in your future?
So I don't know if there's as much as likely, but they do. I mean, there's so many things that go back to what are some things you can do to prevent it? Because a lot of things are our lifestyle choices. So there are some genetic things that give us a tendency for something. Your diet, Mediterranean diet, the amount of alcohol you drink, or even, you can decide not to drink at all, but getting exercise. There are things that you can do to actually just help prevent bad health consequences in general. And those are the things I think people should focus more on is what can I do to have better brain health?
Okay. And is it primarily those things? Minimize alcohol, eat a good diet, and exercise?
Yes, those are the biggies that you should think about.
Welcome to today's MoneyWise segment designed to empower you financially and to make you smarter than your neighbor. Today's session is on long-term investing. Listen, I know talking about the stock market on a podcast is super boring. That's why I almost never do it. However, the possible outcomes for you in the stock market are massively, massively exciting. So I want to talk to you about a report that a mutual fund company called Dimensional put out. I did send this out to my clients recently. So if you're one of them, you just saw this report in your email. However, this report is titled Long-Term Investors Don't Let a Recession Phase You. You can see the actual graphic if you go to the show notes for today's episode, but I'm just going to talk through this with you. Basically, we are in a stock market recession right now. Wondering how many of those there have been? There have been 15 recessions in the US in the past century. In 11 of those recessions, stock market returns were positive just 2 years after the recession began. So investors are often tempted to sell out of their stocks and go to cash when there is an increased risk of an economic downturn. but the data tells us that stock prices already include the expectations of a recession and generally have fallen in value even before a recession begins, which means you don't feel the actual depth of the true recession. The average annualized return 2 years after the onset of those 15 recessions was 7.8%. In other words, positive. You are likely to have positive returns in your near future. So a $10,000 investment at the peak of the business cycle would have grown to $11,937 after 2 years on average. That means that $10,000 investment suffered the downturn and then grew back to almost $12,000. And the data for today's MoneyWise segment comes from having invested in the Fama French Total U.S. Market Research Index over the 24 months, starting the month after the relevant recession start date. For more data and backup on this report, go to hillaryhendershot.com/165. Any indications about, and this is something I've read and maybe you don't know, but about fake sweeteners, like Splenda, things like that, saccharin?
I have not seen that because, well, I use Truvia, so does that count?
Oh, stevia, right? That's a
Yeah.
plant. Yeah. I do too.
But it's still processed.
Yeah.
And we could find out that it's the cans. You know, the reason why kids have more peanut allergies or people have more dementias is not just because we're living longer, but it's because we're getting things through canned food or our food source. So I think it's really hard to know. And I think it's watch the science and just make smart choices.
Okay. And what do people with dementia need from their loved ones? I imagine, sort of walk us through the journey, because I think your parents' needs got more intense over time. And it's upsetting to realize that the person who birthed you and raised you may be, declining or becoming sick. How can someone prepare themselves to be a caregiver? And really, how can you know if you shouldn't be a caregiver?
Wow, that's a great idea. A lot of it is, we figured out in our family who ended up being me just because I was close. So, I mean, it's funny because there's 4 of us. My sister she's a lawyer. She was named power of attorney. We all know that my brother was really my mom's favorite. There's the favored one. But I was the one that was here. So I really didn't have much of a choice.
Mm-hmm.
I knew them. So I had been the last kid and I still lived around home. So I spent most of my adult life with them. They were over at our house all the time. So it was easy for me to step into the role in some ways because I was familiar. And I also knew a lot about their preferences. And so I think the biggest issue is making sure you give them purpose and meaning, because what I see so many times, and I say this from experience, is the first thing you do is when you start seeing, a loved one make a financial mistake, is kids take away the checkbook. Mom, you can't do this. Dad, you don't want to drive anymore. You start taking away things from them. And to me, what I learned is the longer I could help them preserve the lifestyle they were living,
mm-hmm.
bubble wrap around it, made me feel good. And it also helps them. And so I think it's hard to think about that way because we're all so busy doing these things. But I think that's one of the reasons why I end up becoming a daily money manager, is I realized you can hire people to do the basic work. You could have someone take them to doctor's appointments and help navigate some of those things. Do you have the amount of money in your retirement planning to help bring in these resources so your children and your friends can remain friends and children and not helpers? So I hope that's something that you can include, when thinking about retirement is how do they maintain those relationships? And I think as a caregiver, that's a really important thing to think of. So a lot of people don't have time. So if you don't have time, is there a way to pay for those services and bring someone in that will be patient with them and help them maintain their dignity and their sense of self?
And so how do you know when they need to leave the home and go to a place where they're cared for full time?
I wish there was a simple answer for that one. So, it's interesting because I grew up with a mom that told me she never wanted to live with her children. So they're in the community. My dad passes away, and that would have been a great point to go, you know what, Mom, why don't you just come live at home? because I was driving to go see her quite frequently. We're trying to find caregivers. It's really hard to find a good caregiver and someone that clicks with, especially with someone with dementia who doesn't think they need help.
Right.
So there's just so much conflict that goes on there. But I think it's knowing that your parents are lucky to have someone that loves them be involved, and you're going to make the best decision you can with the information you have when you need to make that choice. And you're just going to have to be comfortable with the choices you're going to have to make for someone else who's really not able to do it. So now that my parents aren't here anymore and I help other families navigate these things, I know, one, they're keeping the dad at home because he wants to stay there. He has 2 cats. They're important to him. Cats can't go into the retirement community. And now we're in the middle of quarantining in place. So he's basically locked in his home all by himself. And we're trying to put things around him to keep him entertained. It would be great if he was in a community, but he still would be by himself. So you just have to kind of look at the individual and understand what is the best place for them to live the life they want to lead, and make those choices as you can. So it could be if they're starting fires, could you disconnect the stove and have food brought in if they really wanted to age in place in their home, which a lot of people still want to do. Do they have the ability to pay for a live-in caregiver? So someone that can be in the background and be more of a roommate. If they do thrive on more social interaction, it might be a good time to move them into a community. I actually saw my mom dancing and doing things with other people that I never thought she would do once we got her into a memory care community that really was a good fit for her.
Mm-hmm.
It's really personal to the family and to the individual to look ahead and maybe go, what's the right choice for them right now? And those things could change. It might be good and you're planning on keeping them in the home, but if they need more skilled nursing, they might need to go into a facility that has more nursing resources, because it's kind of not affordable to bring that into your home, and it's really hard to find nurses now.
It is, and it's really tough for the kids. If you're the child in the position of watching your parent age or get sick, because you probably have children of your own, you have a life, you have a retirement of your own you need to prepare for. And so being a caregiver is not an easy choice. It takes a lot out of people. So I just wanted to acknowledge that not all people are in a position to offer that to their parents. And I know that comes with a lot of guilt, usually.
Well, there's guilt if you're the caregiver, and there's guilt if you're not local to do it. So everybody feels guilt.
Yeah. It's just a bad situation.
There's no getting away from that.
Yeah. Okay. Your website says you offer daily money management. And just a few minutes ago, you referred to yourself as a daily money manager. What does that mean?
So we are not financial advisors. We don't do investing. We really, our goal is to go into someone's home and help them manage their finances if they're either too busy or overwhelmed to manage it for themselves. So I specialize in doing those services for families that have someone with a cognitive issue.
Mm-hmm.
Work to go in, and we sit side by side with them to help them keep that checkbook in front of them and be involved in the finances for as long as they want to be. We end up doing home maintenance, and I refer to us, most of us are professional sons and daughters.
Oh, understood. Okay. And you say you have a team of people that do this?
I do. After doing it for about a year, I realized that I'd be a single point of failure if I wasn't around or I wanted to take a vacation. So I started bringing on other colleagues to support me and my clients.
Okay. And so I imagine you offer those services where you can physically be in the home. So is that in the state of Virginia, or are you more remote than that?
Well, now everybody's remote. So you hopefully with the social distancing. So we serve people in Maryland, DC, and Virginia. So we're in the Metro DC area in person to do this person services. But we also do have remote clients. So we do some services where we download their data on Quicken, and we do monthly reports for them, and we manage their bill pay them. So it really depends. Every customer has a different service that we offer.
Great.
We've learned to do it remotely now.
Out of necessity, right?
Yes, out of necessity.
Okay. It's amazing what we've learned to do on Zoom. And tell me about MemoryBanc.
So MemoryBanc, actually, I started this as a more of a product solution to help company or individuals really and caregivers manage all the information you need to manage for mom and dad or for a loved one. So personal information, bank account details, health information, online passwords, security questions, and PINs, birthdays and anniversaries. So it was all the stuff that I needed to really know, help my parents. Even though I had power of attorney and we ended up having a trust and all those things, it's really all the other information in our life that you're going to need to be someone's advocate for them personally or medically or financially.
So is it a spreadsheet? Is it a password protected vault? What is it?
Oh, sorry. So we started out with a binder system because I figured it needed to be adjustable. So we have a binder product. We have a workbook that you can get on Amazon. It's MemoryBanc, your workbook for organizing life. And we also have a flash drive system for people that want a paperless tool.
Oh, okay. So you can get it in whatever form you like it. And it's basically, It's essentially a list of all the things that you needed to take care of your parents, and you've just aggregated it for people.
Yes.
Understood. Okay. And we're definitely going to make that available on the website for the show notes for today's episode at hillaryhendershot.com/165. And Kay, in the pre-chat, we were talking about some of the things that are coming up for you now. Would you share what you said about asking your son for his passwords?
Yes. So one of the things I do a lot of presentations on, what do you need to save and why do you need to organize it? And for years, I've been asking my kids to write all their usernames and passcodes and put them in an envelope I hope I never need to open. They know where to find all my usernames and passcodes, but I just think it's very important for their children because most people don't know, one, that we don't have digital rights as an adult or as a parent. So I always ask my kids to do that. Well, now my son's 23. He's actually home because he lives in San Francisco, but since everything's closed, he's working from home here. I mentioned to him, I'm like, it's about time for you to update your spreadsheet. And he kind of looked at me funny, like, I'm an adult, I'm living on my own. Why would you need that? And I'm like, well, if something happened to you, let's just say, and your apartment is auto pulling money out of your bank account, how would we stop that? He's like, that's a good question. I didn't even think about those things that I set up on auto pay that you might need to access. So there are financial reasons that it would be helpful that someone had access to the information, but it is also your social media that someone might need access to, just to give updates to friends and family. If you were sick and you wanted to share that with people, you could actually do a post on their behalf. So there's lots of reasons to ask for it. And it was just funny that I'm glad that he thought enough of me and trusted me enough to give me the information, but he is going to write it down and put it in an envelope I hope I never have to open.
Right. And you keep those in paper form and you're asking kids to update them about once a year or something because we change our passwords.
Right. I was doing it every 3 months when my kids were active on the social media. And honestly, I know I haven't done it for 6 months. So now it's time for me to ask them both. So my daughter's going to be giving me a list of her stuff too. So I would say every 3 months, unless I just have them open it up and say, open it up, make a change, put it back in the envelope, seal it.
And part of the reason when I explain to clients why I recommend that they do complete estate planning, which of course I don't get paid to do, I just recommend they do it with an attorney, is this is how you make the hardest thing in life as easy as possible on the people that you love. And it sounds like adding a list of your current passwords to those documents for your loved ones is becoming a required piece of that. That if they don't have that information, not only do they have to deal with their grief, but all this sort of frustration and confusion and probably financial losses as well.
Right. And I'm sure you're probably familiar with the $58 billion sitting in missing money.
Yes.
Federal treasuries, because people just lose track of it. We're not organized, and there's no reason for that money to end up in a big pool of money just waiting to be claimed.
$58 billion. Wow. That could fund half the CARES Act.
Yes, it could.
Okay, great. All right, Kay, thank you. Is there anything I haven't asked about today? Anything you want to make sure to include for my listeners today?
No, I guess my final thought is just, this isn't just for people as they're aging and they're going into retirement, but it's really important for young adults to do it as well, because we all have online information, we all have assets, and especially for millennials that keep all that stuff online. Even the screen code to your computer might be very important. I've had some families actually had something happen to their adult child and they couldn't get into the computer where all the passport information was stored. So there is more information that you need to share with your family, and I hope people will just take a moment to do that now.
Perfect. Thanks for everything, Kay. We'll include links to everything we talked about today in the show notes for today's episode. Once again, that's hillaryhendershot.com/165. Kay, good luck with the rest of the quarantine and stay healthy. And thanks for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you. Be well.
Hey, Profit Boss. If after listening to today's episode, you think you might be ready to take meaningful actions with your wealth and perhaps consider working with me and my firm in some way, then I'd love to hear from you. Just go to hillaryhendershot.com/hello. That's Hillary with one L and Hendershot with two T's. .com/hello. When I'm not sitting behind the mic, I'm running Hendershot Wealth Management. We're a fee-only fiduciary financial advisory firm. We work with women and couples to take their finances to the next level. Everything I talk about here on the show gets personalized and put to work for my clients. So I ask you, why wait till tomorrow when you can start realizing your full wealth potential today? The life you want to live, it doesn't have to wait. Just imagine the freedom and joy you'll experience when you've secured your retirement and enjoyed the years leading up to it. That's what I want for you. That's what I do for my clients. And if that's what you want for yourself, just head on over to my website right now, hillaryhendershot.com/hello. All of our initial conversations are totally complimentary. So let's just see where a friendly conversation may lead. hillaryhendershot.com/hello. As we wrap things up here for today, I need to review with you the things I have to disclose as a fiduciary financial advisor offering wealth management services through my firm, Hendershot Wealth Management, LLC. You should know that the opinions I express on Profit Boss Radio are my own, and they can change. The content I provide in the show is for general education. It's not intended as specific investment advice, nor do I recommend any specific financial products. Unlike how I roll at home with my husband, I can't guarantee that my statements, opinions, or forecasts are always 100% right. Of course, I wish I could peek into that proverbial crystal ball, but so far, I haven't found it. Past performance is not indicative of future results. I talk a lot about indexes, and I want you to know you can't actually buy an index because, of course, when you take a list of companies and create a product that allows people to invest in those companies, there are fees and expenses involved that reduce returns. Remember, all investing involves risk, which, as you know, means you could lose your money. And I have to tell you that there is no guarantee that any investment plan or strategy will be successful. And that should keep my lawyers happy. Have a great day.